The Fellowship of the Great Physician welcomes you to House Call. Our hosts today are doctors of chiropractic, Dr. Gerald Lala and Dr. Richard Jensen, who is also a board-certified acupuncturist, practice independently in North Oaks, Minnesota. And Dr. David Schwietert practices in Rapid City, South Dakota. Let's join our hosts for today's program that will assist you in your quest for optimum health and well-being.
Welcome to House Call. I'm Dr. Gerald Lala.
I'm Dr. David Schwietert.
And I'm Dr. Richard Jensen.
It's wonderful to have you with us. We are into a wonderful series on identifying your individual biochemical nature. And we all do have individual biochemical natures, and our goal is to help you discover that. And we're in part 3 of a 5-part series. The first series discussed the general aspects of what we call adrenal dominant personalities, thyroid dominant personalities, pituitary dominant personalities, and gonad dominant personalities. And that simply means that some people have a stronger dominance of their thyroid gland in their body, some of their gonads, some of their thyroid, some of their pituitary, and so those glands are very strong in their body, and they cause certain personality characteristics as well as certain inclinations to eat certain foods more than one should. And when that's the case, not only does it predispose people to anorexia, bulimia, or obesity, but also other serious health problems that often people aren't aware of, that they could be eating certain foods that could be contributing to psychological problems such as depression or anxiety, or chronic back problems, or migraine headaches, or arthritis, fibromyalgia, or irritable bowel syndrome is another one. So in our last program, we discussed at length the adrenal dominant personality, and that simply means that we have on top of each kidney adrenal glands, and they produce, of course, our corticosteroids. Some of the common ones are adrenaline and epinephrine and cortisone, and we discussed the inclinations and the influences of those adrenal glands on certain types of personalities. And we know that when we look at the outside of a person's body, we can see certain characteristics that are physically related to adrenal dominance, thyroid dominance, gonad dominance, or pituitary dominance. Today we're going to discuss very specifically the thyroid dominant personality, and as we do that, we want to remind you that we are not just an adrenal dominant personality or a thyroid dominant personality or a gonad dominant personality or a pituitary dominant personality. We are a mixture. So we have a primary and a secondary characteristic in these personalities, and they're influenced by the foods we eat. They also influence our psychological nature, and they influence our spiritual nature. So with that, and no further more ado, we're going to have Dr. David Schwietert, our esteemed colleague from Rapid City, South Dakota, who is an expert in this area, and he's going to start the discussion of the thyroid dominant personality.
Thank you, Dr. Lala, for those kind words. As we look at, we're going to talk about men, we're going to talk about women and their specific characteristic patterns, and then we're going to talk about characteristics that are shared by both of them. Let's start out with the men. In men, they typically, the thyroid dominant would have a spare tire on their body or around their waist, and they have a very flat or practically no rear end. So if you looked at a man from behind, you know, he's real flat. Women, conversely, would tend to have medium to large breasts, which tend to increase in size with age. They may have saddlebags, and they are also prone to extreme and painful and difficult menstrual cramping. Their behind or derriere is round, but it's not large or pronounced. The body is curvy and fuller in the waist, hips, and thighs. They typically, again, if they're going to put on weight, would have that spare tire. They're a little bit wider at the hip, heavier upper thighs, and during pregnancy, these T-types will be uncomfortable and will feel heavy. Characteristics that are similar to both are They would be slender, fine boned, straight back, long arms and legs. They have a tendency to bruise easily and have red spots on their skin. Their head is long with a slender face. They have a small chest or rib cage. Their fingers and toes are long and slender. Their teeth are small, white, even, and are prone to cavities. Their mouth is wide and expressive. Cellulite, if they have it, would be found in their upper arms, their hips, upper thighs. Their skin is smooth and normal in oiliness. So predominantly, if you pick up a magazine and look at the models that are in these magazines, or look on television to see these people, especially women, they're going to be your models. They're long, slender. They're the ones that are on the workout videos that are the T type, primarily the T body types. And they have nice slender legs, not real large, and typically are more prone to see a lot more of them in our magazines and our advertisements because they look pretty good. Food inclinations, well, the weak spots would be that they would enjoy breads and sweets. Interestingly enough, as we talk about this, if we want to find out a real common question that we would ask people is say, well, what foods, if you're under a lot of stress, what foods do you go to? And the thyroid particular type would go to your sweets, breads, toast, jam, cakes, and candies. They often would overindulge in lots of coffee, like 4 or 5 more cups a day. They also can be abusive of soda pop. They will typically see that lunch is their largest meal or biggest meal of the day. And interestingly enough, the T-body type dominant can almost eat anything for years. And then all of a sudden, they can gain 20 pounds right away. And also, their highest energy period follows after eating their meals. So interestingly enough, those food inclinations are real strong for the thyroid body type. Now, Dr. Jensen is going to carry on.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sweeter. Let's start by, we just went through all these characteristics. Why don't we bring up these examples of these people, and anybody can join in here to make comments. What we have there is, of course, you can recognize on the left-hand side of your screen, there's a very famous actor, Dick Van Dyke, and he is a classic T-type. He's got that forehead, his a full head of hair, basically. A lot of T-types have that full head of hair. They retain their hair. But as we go towards the center, we've got Prince Charles and Princess Diana. If you look, they're a combination of types. Actually, Prince Charles is a combination AP type, which we talk about adrenal pituitary type. But if you look at Princess Diana, she has very thyroid dominant characteristics. That full head of hair. She's got some adrenal dominance in her as well, which is probably the drive that made her to the point where she was adored by many people, that she just tirelessly went through things. But if you look at her, if we could see her fingers down here, they tend to be long, but also with the thyroid dominance we were talking about earlier, that they have this long neck that we tend to look at in pictures. If you look at models, they try to have that long neck, and usually the T-types are those long, slender people that we have. Other characteristics, again, the straight back, long arms and legs. Other characteristics is a small rib cage, so you can see where over in this picture where we have the small rib cage that she has in here as well. Anything else?
Generally, this isn't, of course, all carved in stone, but generally, 2 T-types in a relationship don't work as well, and nor do 2 A's or 2 P's or 2 thyroid dominants or pituitary dominants or gonad dominants. And why that is, I don't know. We can speculate on it, but generally, a marriage or a business relationship or whatever kind of a relationship will be that one will be an A and the other will be stronger T, or one will be a strong A or dominant A, and the other will be a stronger pituitary dominant, or a strong A adrenal dominant with a strong gonad dominant. And why that is, we have no idea. It's probably that the A have a tendency to always want to be in control. They have to always be in control, and they're risk takers, and they're going to do this and that because that's what stimulates them. Risks stimulate them. And then if they eat a diet that's high in red meats, for example, they're going to really be a heavy risk taker. Now, a T-type, which is more, I'm more T, more thyroid dominant than I am adrenal dominant. I have a minor adrenal dominant. And so that personality is more creative. It thinks, they could be painters, they could be graphic artists. If it's somebody that is a writer or a wordsmith with a computer or by hand or typewriter, that's more of the T dominant. So if you put two T people together, there seems to be more friction in their personalities as opposed to a T and an A, or vice versa with other type personalities. So that's why many times when we see people who are going through relationship breakups or divorces, business conflicts, conflicts at work or at church or wherever they might be, it's usually the two A's banging heads into each other. Now, if you get two P types, they're just not going to do anything. They're just going to sit and think about it for quite a while. Right. And their goal in life is really not to make too many decisions. Their real decision that they make is not to do too much.
And they want a lot of information.
That's right. They want to have all this information, but you can't get them to make a decision. So, Dr. Jensen, do you have any more to offer with that?
Well, we have another slide as well for different people here. You can see, again, full head of hair with short foreheads on many of these people, long necks, long slender features again. But we could, well, let's go into some of these metabolic keys then for these people. These people, when they are energetic, they need 5 to 6 hours of sleep daily. When exhausted, they need 9 to 10 hours to recover. And with occasional sleeping problems. These people tend to have, they do best with short bursts of energy, but they have a hard time with the long, drawn out, the endurance kind of things. And so for these people, many times you see a lot of T-types are runners, and they've chosen the kind of exercise that's best for them. Long endurance exercise is good for these people because they do run out of energy fairly quickly, and what this does is it expands their capacities. It expands their capacities so that they can do the work. Generally, when they start projects, they're very creative, very excited when they start a project, but then their A-type part, their adrenal part, has to kick in to see them through to the end. So it's good for them to be paired with people who are adrenal dominant so that the project gets started, it gets going, it's very creative, and then the adrenal type can help carry them through if these people don't have that adrenal dominance in themselves that gets to produce. And sometimes we can change that by the diet that we're taking too, to help that particular characteristics come through. Remember, we're looking at that what we eat is almost like a drug to us. And these people who are thyroid dominant, as we covered earlier, when it gets like 3 in the afternoon, they beg, borrow, steal to get a candy bar, carbohydrate, bread, donut, bagel, that kind of thing. Because they want to drive that cylinder in their engine to give them the most kick for what they need at that point. So these people, again, their hands and feet sometimes, they swell in hot weather. The feet and hands are cold at night. They enjoy a good workout, but not a strenuous workout, such as the A-type would like. They're prone to fatigue, tiredness, ulcers, stomach problems, and diarrhea. They exercise to calm down, and so they can eat more. Isn't that interesting? They will exercise so that they can eat more. One of the things with these people always going for the breads and things like that, they might have a tendency more towards insulin problems in that regard. And exercise calms them down, gives them a more even keel of energy, because exercise is like taking the best drug for insulin control. So if anybody has diabetic problems, exercise is your key. They exercise to calm down. Okay. They have back problems, usually involving the neck and shoulder area. They do not perspire much, and the taste and smell are their strongest senses. Hearing is the weakest sense. So I have a bit of T-type in me, and I tell you, sometimes, some days my sense of smell is so very acute. I could be standing on the other side of a great hall, and somebody opens the refrigerator. I could tell you what's on those shelves. But on the other hand, as my wife can attest, a lot of times my hearing may not be as good as I want it to be. Yeah. So let's go on to psychological keys. Dr. Lala?
Thank you, Dr. Jensen. Some of the psychological keys of thyroid dominant personalities are they are the most creative of all types of people. They're good at thinking up ideas and projects and marketing programs. They gravitate to arts and creative projects. One of our daughters is an AT, and she works for a major cardiovascular corporation, and she's an international marketing director. And I mean, she's got ideas coming out of her nose and her eyes and her head. You know, it's just so creative. They gravitate to the arts and creative people and projects. They're funny, they're humorous people. They often tend to be quick-tempered, tend towards depression, often irritable and even cruel when they're down. They enjoy variety, they enjoy inner reaction and love to travel. I used to enjoy traveling, but now with airports the way they are and things like that, I don't anymore. They love to keep trying new ideas. I never work on any new ideas, do I? No, never. They enjoy sex in spurts and then lots of nothing, and they just don't want any involvement with sex for a while. That creative energy is rebuilding, and the thyroid gland is recharging itself. And once it's recharged, watch out, they got 10,000 ideas, and if they're married, they want to have a lot of sex. They like many friends. They tend to be very loyal. They carry their emotions close to the surface. They're generally tender and compassionate people, often moody, run hard and fast at everything. You should talk to my wife sometime about if I get involved in a project. And then go into stages of exhaustion. I know one of the women in our fellowship and our crew who's worked with us for years, Glenda, always can tell when the end of a trimester is getting near because I get worked down. But I'm working on that now. I'm working on that now, that I don't get burned down towards the end of a trimester. And they have a tendency to be independent type individuals because they need to have time to think. And I'll give you an example about Dr. Jensen and I were out running yesterday, and then we did some walking, and we must have been out, 2.5 hours? And it was a beautiful day, and we had a good time to talk with each other and discuss visions in our families and kids and grandkids and things like that. Well, he didn't do any more running or walking than I did. Well, we got down the first mile, and he was perspiring like crazy, and there wasn't a drop of water on me. And he's a little bit more adrenal dominant than I am. And so there's a good idea. I don't perspire. I can be out running, hardly ever perspire. And that's part of the personality of the T-dominant person. But there's an interesting factor that we should bring up here. Even though we've been discussing, and we'll be discussing more in detail, the different types of foods that are good for thyroid-dominant people and the types of foods that are bad for thyroid-dominant people, we want to give you a little pamphlet here that we can share with you. There's no charge for it. Nobody's going to call you or put you on a list or anything like that. But even though I know that certain foods are good for my thyroid dominant personality and certain other foods are bad, still I have an individual biochemical nature. Dr. Sweetert has an individual biochemical nature, Dr. Jensen does, and so do you. And so does everyone that you know. Everyone in society has certain biological characteristics that affect their personality. But instead of saying, well, I know now the key for me to lose weight is that I don't eat the foods that are bad for a thyroid dominant personality. And I know that I went for years without hardly gaining any weight, and then
Bam.
all of a sudden, bam, the weight starts to hang on there. And that's a characteristic of a personality, of an adrenal dominant and a thyroid dominant personality. So for me, I know the general foods that are good for me, I know the general foods that are bad for me, but as that pamphlet showed there, It is a pamphlet that discusses what we're talking about, as well as how to test for foods that you might be hypersensitive to. And there are all kinds of allergy tests out there. But the key one is most allergies are testing for fixed allergies. And that's not hard to figure those out. I mean, if you get near a dog or cat and start to sneeze and get a runny nose, you know you have a fixed allergy. If you get around certain pollens and you have a reaction, that's a fixed allergy. That's a reaction. All proteins carry antigens, and when those antigens get in our blood, boom, our antibodies say these are not good for me, and bang, they start to bang it out, and there is an antigen-antibody reaction. Now, in orthodox medical care, they say, well, you take an antihistamine. Well, the antihistamine isn't accomplishing a thing other than it's covering up the symptoms. Whereas if you know what foods your body is reacting to, and now we're talking now about the cyclic reactions. In other words, there are foods that we eat that can be very healthy foods as far as society is concerned, but they cause certain antigen-antibody reactions with us, and so you want to have not only fixed food allergy testing, but you want to have the cyclic or delayed food sensitivity testing, meaning that you could very well eat something right now, feel fine, 12, 15 hours later, have a migraine headache, have a backache, have some emotional changes because you ate foods that, unbeknownst to you, you're hypersensitive to. And so it is important then that you get some information on what we call the combined IgE and IgG4 food allergy screening. So, and also if you want to know, if you watch any of these Christian evangelists on television, Marilyn Hickey, for example, is more of a T-type. Francis Hunter is an A-type. Charles Hunter is an A-type too, but there's a lot of P in him. Pituitary dominant, not urine in him. Gee, I just thought about that. We have to be careful with that, don't we?
Be careful.
Robert Schuller, Sr., Big Daddy, that's an A-type personality. The son, Bobby, is more TA, more thyroid dominant A personality. All right? So if you're going to have, for example, a big business, or a big ministry of some kind, or a big social club, or whatever you're involved in, they're going to be bigger if you have these A-type adrenal dominant personality. They always have these high forehead lines. The T-type people, they're not so interested in volume and numbers. They're more interested in creating things and teaching. And therefore, they would attract more people who are teaching, educationally oriented. They want to grow in their knowledge, whereas A-type people will attract to them more risk takers. So they're always leading these people off in another risky venture, right?
That's right.
Right. And Joyce Myers, for example, if you know who she is, that's an A-type personality. That's an adrenal dominant personality. If you look at her husband, Dave, there's more thyroid dominant in him. There's A in him, but his thyroid dominant comes out a little bit more, so he's a little bit more steady and a little bit more even-keeled in his emotions. He can think out things and think out projects and work through marketing programs and things like that. Gloria and Kenneth Copeland. Now that's an interesting couple, praise the Lord. I have great appreciation of them. Those are two A-type personalities. They are heavy risk takers. But she has a lot more of thyroid dominant in her. If you watch, he's more of a preacher, evangelist. She is more of a teacher. You see there, if you ever see her on television, she's got about 6 or 7 Bibles there. And she's going through all these Bibles. See, she's very T-oriented as far as teaching, point by point, point by point. And then when she gets revved up, her little A comes up, and she'll start working the crowd. Whereas Kenneth Copeland, there isn't much T in him. He just wham. Let's see, Creflo Dollar, what would you say he is?
Creflo Dollar, I'd say A and T.
A and T. Now, if you look at his wife, that's A. Kathy is A. And does it mean that any of these people are bad or not of any value? No, they're wonderful people. We're all created in the image of God. We are. And so we have these varieties. God doesn't want us to be homogenized. But again, if you eat certain foods that overstimulate one of the glands, or a gland that is a dominant gland in your body, it's going to make you screwy. It really will. And if you're eating foods that you don't even know are causing you to have health issues or psychological issues, then you can identify that. So, Dr. Sweetert, anything else to add to that?
Well, I do have a couple thoughts, and what we found interesting in our consultations with, besides doing health when we go into businesses and work with groups, is that we find out that when we do these personality type characteristic profiles, we can actually help businesses or families or relationships to guide them and give them direction to help them understand themselves. Because a lot of times when we go into dysfunctional situations, whether it's a marriage or relationship or a business or employment, we often find that there are these oddball mixes of body characteristics, and there's just no way, as Dr. Lala and Dr. Jensen have stated previously, there's just no way that you can have a smooth operation when you have primarily adrenal dominant people in a group, because nobody will follow through with it. Everybody wants to lead, but there's no people to follow through.
Right, exactly.
And the other side is if you have a bunch of P's. I like to think of pituitary dominant, like engineers. You know, they want lots and lots of information, but it's very difficult for them to make a decision. So you need these mixtures. Dr. Jensen.
It's very interesting about how some of these things have worked. You talked about businesses, and where you have people who have balanced out their dominant glands. They will actually partake of some of these foods in order to make particular characteristic traits come out. If you look at, say, board meetings or things like that, where you're getting together and having like a think tank kind of thing, there seems to be donuts there all the time. And what happens is, not only does the donuts help in bringing up a quick fix of energy because of the sugar that's released, but it brings up the serotonin in their brains to make people feel good, so they get along together. But it brings out the creativity, which is one of the things that you really need. Which is also the things that thyroid dominant people can be. It can be one of their liabilities in sticking to raising up their serotonin levels by taking carbohydrates. We have a slide here that talks about the neurological basis of weight gain. And what happens here is that people come in and they'll eat the food, the offending food here. I was just trying to get my pen there so that I could circle that and show you where we're at. They'll eat that food, and what it will do is will end up lowering the blood levels. Here I'm crossing it out. They'll lower the blood levels of serotonin, and that creates discomfort or hunger because we want to have that serotonin in there to feel better. So that discomfort of hunger then occurs. And so what comes from that is the cravings of simple sugars and carbohydrates. A lot of people, what they'll do is they'll have like a big meal, and what do they crave afterwards is to have some sweets and things like that, because I've had one of those offending foods again during their meal. It's kind of like their meat and potatoes is what they're after. Well, to get the cravings of simple sugars and carbohydrates, well, Dr. Lala, do you have any thoughts?
I have thoughts in saying thanks for being with us. Jesus loves you, and so do we.
Totally missed that.
The Fellowship of the Great Physician, through its School of Health and Healing, provides classes each Thursday evening. The primary focus of these classes is biblically based spiritual health and healing, with a brief teaching on physical health and healing. There is no charge or registration fee for these classes, but a free will offering is received. For further information on the School of Health and Healing, class time and location, or the topics discussed on today's program, contact us at the Fellowship of the Great Physician in care of Dr. Lala or Dr. Jensen at 200 Village Center Drive, Suite 100, North Oaks, Minnesota, 55127, or telephone us at 651-484-8521, or contact us at the Fellowship of the Great Physician in care of Dr. David Sweetert at 3936 Jackson Boulevard, Rapid City, South Dakota, 57702. Telephone 605-721-3861. Thank you for joining us today.